This episode of Bright Hearth is brought to you by Live Oak Integrative Health, Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial, Indigo Sundry Soap Company, A Well-Worn Story, Gray Toad Tallow, and by our supporters at patreon.com.
Indeed, all that is true is beautiful as it is also good. The first quality of beauty, as Thomas Aquinas explains, is claritas, radiance, brightness. And truth, in its beauty, is the bright sunlight of the mind. When we see the truth of something, our minds are lit up by the splendor of being. That's why we talk about things dawning on us. Father John Soward.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Bright Hearth, everybody. We are glad to be joining you this evening for a special Q&A episode.
Q&A.
And we had a lot of people sending questions. I asked for some on Facebook and Twitter, but how are you doing, babe?
Good.
You excited to be Bright Hearthing?
We're here, yeah. I like Q&As.
We're hearthing, and it's bright. It's going to be great. Today, we had a small announcement that
Not a very small person.
took the world by storm. What's going on, babe?
A very small person is growing.
A very small person is growing in an undisclosed location. Lexy's womb.
Yay.
Number 7.
Yeah.
We're very, very excited. The kids were so adorable when we told them.
They are funny. Yes. Yep. You're right. Any chance they could get, whether they should be telling people or not, they were.
Mostly not.
It was cute.
Lexy would be on the phone, just talking with someone. They don't know who it is.
They did spill the beans earlier rather than later, which is fine. It was good.
Mama has a new baby.
It's so funny.
Mama has a new baby.
They're so excited. I just love that they don't know how weird it is in today's culture that they're getting a 6th sibling.
7th. Well, each of them would have a 6th. Yeah, because they're
right.
the 7th. You're right.
Yeah. So, anyways,
I thought you
it's
lost
very
count
sweet.
for a second.
No, I did not lose count.
I told them at dinner.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't know yet. And so I'm praying before dinner as usual. And I just, right before the end of the prayer, just casually slipped in and thank you for this new baby in mommy's womb. Amen. And they were looked up stunned. Their eyes were like saucers. They're like, what?
It's really cute. Daphne's now old enough that she is understanding it more. She's not doing this anymore because they've known for a little while now. Mm-hmm. But the first few days, anytime she found me alone, she was just asking me, "Are you really pregnant? Is there really a baby? Is it really coming?"
And you're like, "Yes."
It's really sweet.
So pray for us. We are very thankful, and thanks for everybody's kind words and prayers when we gave the announcement today on Twitter and everywhere else. A couple things to highlight for you guys before we jump into some questions that you guys have sent in. One of them is a new feature that our podcast distributor has allowed us to, or has added basically to the podcast platform. I think it's pretty much on all of the different platforms. We enable it from our distributor, and then Apple Podcast, Spotify. I think it shows up everywhere. I'm sorry if it doesn't show up on yours and I'm lying. I didn't test it on all of them. But they call it fan mail, but it's basically like a little button at the top that says send us a text. And you can you can text us. Now, here's what I found out after I enabled it. I can't respond to anybody. So I didn't know if I was going to be able to. So just know, if it says send us a text, I'm not ignoring you. I get all of them. I read through all of them. So you can use that for whatever you want. If you want to send in an encouraging note, a question you'd like us to answer, if there's a topic that you enjoyed and you want more of, so pretty much whatever you'd like, feel free to send in little messages through there, and it's super convenient. They all show up in one inbox. I don't have to sort through a Google form thing anymore like I had to do in the past. So I think we're going to start including maybe on most episodes, we'll try to answer a question.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Just pick a question that you guys send in. So that because that was a really fun to do as a season, Q&A, but I'd like to keep doing it without doing it. Only that.
Yeah.
Tonight we are going to be answering questions because we had a lot of good ones lately come in, and we figured let's just take an episode and work through some of those. The second announcement is our friends at Indigo Sundry Soap Company. As you guys know, we talk about them all the time. On Haunted Cosmos, we joke about them all the time. We're trying to make them
very funny.
a meme. But we've been working behind the scenes with them to get subscriptions opened up where you can actually subscribe and say, I want this product every, this often. And we were able to get that worked out on their website. It's indigosundrysoap.com. There's a link in the description. And I think most products, maybe not all of them, there's even a subscriptions tab, but I think most products you can now order as a one-time purchase or you can subscribe. And if you subscribe, they're just knocking 10% off permanently on the subscription. So not just the first order, but like all of your orders. So something like a staple,
That's nice.
We use their soap every day. It's like, it's all I use. It's amazing, handmade, homemade, Christian family made soap that is high quality ingredients. Never worry about what's in it, and love it. So check that out. You can get their 10-bar deal. It's such a good deal, I think, and it lasts for quite a while. So definitely check that out. We were happy to hear that they were able to go full-time recently, as we told you guys, and so it's no longer a side hustle. Now they are full-time soap and sundry makers, the Collier family. So support those guys, and we're glad to be a partner with them. But let's jump in before the night waxes late, because it's 8:16 p.m., which if you translate that to Lexi time, that's already 10:15.
Yeah, I was up last night. I was
I know,
up
babe.
late until like 10:30.
You know, you're man. It's tough being you. It's tough being you. Lexi, she can't make it through an episode of The Office.
Pregnant Lexi can't.
Pregnant Lexi, it's like instant KO the second that the head hits the pillow. So let's get ahead of this before that happens. And the first question that we wanted to take up, we got this a few different ways, probably related to the fact that we just announced that we're expecting number 7 to join us. And, a couple different ways this was put, but basically the question is, how do we think through the number of kids in relation to personal capacity, health, finances? Are we planning for like how many kids we're having? Are we aiming for some target and then we're going to be like, nope, no more after this, 7 is it? We've talked about fertility. We've talked about natural family planning before. How are we thinking that through? What kind of factors play into it? And, all that sort of thing. So what comes to mind for you? I mean, we both have different ways I think we'll come about this, thinking through this, even within our own vocations and responsibilities.
There's kind of like a few different phrases that have stuck out to me over the years. 2 of them come from a good friend of mine. The first one was that I remember her telling me, like, don't ever make a decision out of fear, because then you're in sin. You need to make a decision like that out of faith, which relates to how I think of stewardship and fertility. And it's that there's, for whatever reason, it's only with fertility that we think of stewardship as complete hands-off. Every other area we understand, your mind has to be engaged, your hand has to be engaged, your resources have to be engaged, be it financial, be it in the home, be it with food, be it with your time, your energy. But for whatever reason, it's like totally okay for Christians to say 100% hands off, which is true to an extent.
What do you mean by that, 100% hands off?
Like you are more filled with faith if you just trust the Lord, even if you're going through a cancer diagnosis. You are more filled with faith, like in getting pregnant is what I'm saying. You're more filled with faith if you don't use an epidural. You are more filled with faith if, I don't know, like you have your husband, literally, you guys are really struggling financially and you have a baby anyways. But that's just not how Hebrews talks about faith. Faith is really active. And I'm not like, obviously, you're not in sin to just keep getting pregnant if you can handle it. But it's also not sin to actively be stewarding that through a season that you might genuinely be struggling financially and it might not make sense for your family. Or again, like a cancer diagnosis, it might not make sense to have a baby right now while you're going through treatments. And that's not sin and that's not faithless. You can still be trusting the Lord and stewarding that actively. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think on the other side, in terms of the hands-off approach, some people immediately take we're going to take a permanent solution, quote unquote,
Correct.
to our fertility. Get a vasectomy. We're going to have some permanent surgical.
Pro that either.
People rush to those. I can't tell you the number of men and families that have, as a result of, listening to podcasts, coming to our church, things like that have gone and reversed vasectomies because they were 2 or 3 kids in, and they went maybe, high 20s, early 30s, have a couple kids, and they were like, oh, this is really hard. They're in the midst of often after a really difficult pregnancy or a really difficult season postpartum or a really difficult season disciplining lots of young kids, and all of a sudden they were like, by lots I mean literally in some cases 2 or 3, and and then they said, let's go get a vasectomy, we're done, and came to regret it in many cases, and said, wow, we did that way too hastily. We were again trying for, instead of in wisdom, active management, taking care, thinking through nourishing and cherishing of the wife from a husband's perspective, thinking of all these different, how do I care for my children? How do I plan my house and build my house? And an elder has to manage his household well and all these things. Instead of that, we are prone to try and make drastic decisions that require us not to have to exercise that active management. In either direction, I think you can do this. Are you tired of not feeling well and of having your doctor treat your symptoms without taking the time to investigate what's really going on? Rebecca Belch owns Live Oak Integrative Health and is passionate about helping women and families achieve the health that God designed our bodies to have. She has been a critical care and labor and delivery nurse for 20 years and is a licensed practitioner of functional medicine. Her goal is to address the root causes of dysfunction in your body and to help you give your body what it needs so that you can create a legacy of health that extends to your children and grandchildren. She provides a wide range of testing options to uncover your underlying health issues, such as fatigue, weight gain, and gut problems. She then works with you to develop a plan that focuses on nutrition, hormone balance, and long-term habits to promote enduring health. She also specializes in health for women who will become or currently are pregnant. This time is often overlooked and is the most important window to create generational health. Contact her right now for a $50 discount on any of her service options. You can do this on her website, liveoakintegrativehealth.com, and that link will be in the description for you. If you have a young family like me, you work hard every day to ensure you care for your wife and kids. Providing for a young family is challenging, with rising costs. It doesn't look like things are going to change in the future. Maybe you've thought like I have, I wish I'd started investing years ago. My family would be in a better financial position. As they say about trees, the best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. Don't let the benefit of time go to waste on your financial planning for retirement or inheritance for your generations. Joe Garrissey with Backwards Planning Financial has been working with us to make the best plan for our family. He's a Christian who works with one of the largest and most trusted financial service companies in the world. He's been helping Lexy and I work towards our financial goals and helps us navigate the complexities of the markets. Whether you have millions in assets or you're just starting to invest, Joe Garrissey can help you reach your goals to grow the kingdom and leave a good legacy for your generations. Visit backwardsplanningfinancial.com, that's backwardsplanningfinancial.com, or call 615-767-2555 to speak with Joe to prepare for the future. The testimonials presented may not be representative of the experience of other clients and are not a guarantee of future performance or success. If you're like us, the changing seasons wreak havoc on your skin, leaving us in constant search of a healthy product that actually works. Well, they're onto something at Gray Toad Tallow. We're talking about a natural, organic option packed with vitamins A, D, E, and K to moisturize your skin. The minimal ingredients are whipped into a velvety balm and have been known to soothe all kinds of skincare needs, from psoriasis, eczema, and dry skin to sunburns. Speaking of sunburns, if you want to avoid sunburn altogether, we are excited to introduce their tallow-based sunscreen. Sunscreen that's actually good for your skin. They also heard from the men, and though all can use it, they did create a lighter scent using sandalwood. So check out graytoadtallow.com and use code BRIGHT15, that's all caps, BRIGHT15, for 15% off your order, and all of that will be in the description for you.
Yeah, exactly. We're not, and I think that's where people can get frustrated with me specifically, because they hear me say one thing and they're like, oh, you must be X. And I've had people literally tell me this, oh, you must be doing XYZ then. And it's like, no, you're misunderstanding me, because I'm also not on that side of the spectrum. And that's why this can kind of be hard to talk about and it's hard too, because then there's the whole quiverful movement in and of itself is like fairly undefined. So it can be hard for people. It can be hard for me talking to people wanting to associate with that, because I then want to ask more questions of like, well, do you mean this? Are you consistent with this? Are you not consistent with that? So it can just be hard to like talk about that in general. But one of the other things that this friend told me, aside from the faith question, was like, I love you, and so I want you to have more children. And I just remember like hearing her and her husband saying that. And I think when I heard them say that, I was pregnant with my fourth. And I was just like, that probably would be my question, because that's what they were answering, was like, do you think everyone should have more children? And they're like, I don't know if everyone should, but because I love you, I think you should. And I just really like that.
Yeah, that was sweet.
The other thing though is like, as Christians, we should not be populating hell. So we really do have to be asking the question of capacity, resources. But the thing is, when answering that, if a woman is serious about these things and she's willing to let herself be sanctified through childbearing, I think a lot more women can grow their capacity to raise children in the Lord.
Yeah, most people, when they start thinking about these questions, they think about them with this limiting mindset of, I make $45,000 a year, kids cost this much, my wife's, so therefore we have a capacity of 3 or 4 kids. That's it. Most people will lean towards, or at least there's a certain mind type of person that will lean towards saying, let's be really conservative here. But I actually think that's most often a mistake, because what you find, especially if you're a Christian man thinking through these things with wisdom and you care, about glorifying the Lord, you find that when the Lord puts more in the back of your truck, that you level up. You have a drive. You go and you do what it takes. You find yourself, and I've heard this from many men. They're like, we had 2 kids and we were making $30,000 a year, and I thought there's no way we could ever have more kids. But then this deep love that the Lord gave me for my people and lit a fire under me, and all of a sudden I found zeal and strength and courage to go try new things that I never thought I would find. And now here we are, 5 kids deep, and I make $85,000 a year. And I got rid of this limiting belief that I could only ever make 30, or I could only ever make 40, or I could never change careers, or I could never do this hard thing, or I could never move. And it's like, look, the Lord didn't make a world with a fixed pie, and he didn't like put a hard ceiling on you that whatever you're making at 22 is going to be what you're going to be making forever.
Yeah.
So faith looks like actively in wisdom managing, doing all of your duties and doing them well. And that does require a balance where you're nourishing and cherishing your wife, where you're saying, like, allowing your wife rest, for getting more to our experience. That means for us that we're not actively attempting to have another child as quickly as possible after each baby. That's allowed Lexy to recover more, to go in with strength and, kind of replenish.
Because this something, and I've talked to a lot of moms about this, something really can happen when you're living just for the next pregnancy, where you are cutting as many corners as possible in your home. So you're not really flourishing anywhere because you've had no replenishing time at all. And that's not necessarily the sort of environment you do want to raise a flourishing family in. And I think it's different for each family to know what that boundary is for them. For me, it might look faster. Someone listening to this might be like, wow, that's way sooner than I could handle it. But the other end of the spectrum is also like, wow, why did they wait so long?
Yeah.
So, and part of it too is just the way he's made my body, the way I can and can't get pregnant. Like it's just God's wisdom in a lot of different ways. But that's something I noticed about myself, was that in some ways, you're talking about leveling up. In some ways, I did have to like really have a hard break with that cycle of, no, I really do need a little bit more time. So I am not in survival mode nonstop.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, we don't do anything other than natural family planning, which I do believe is ideal. I think certain things are completely off the table, obviously, like hormonal birth control. I think a lot of these things that are both harmful to the woman and also evil, because they're abortifacient, and there's all sorts of problems with these things. I think natural family planning is lawful. Yeah, I've heard really silly things from from quiverful folks like natural family planning is worse than murder. I've heard
Yes.
people say, I mean, this is in a book. There's literally a book
Yes.
out there. I'm not going to tell you because I don't want anybody to read it because it's that bad.
Or people that quiverful people that believe you should only have sex if you can get pregnant that day and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to talk about that, because it's like, what kind of quiverful are you then? Because we don't want anything to do with that.
So you have that over on the one far edge of the conversation where people are making the claim that all of your Christian forefathers would have said that any natural family planning of any sort is literally worse than murder. Like, to the point where if you're even if your goal is we're going to wait 18 months after a child to get pregnant for the sake of nourishing replenishment, all of this kind of financial preparation, that sort of thing. I've literally heard that claim. That's worse than going and murdering a guy. Mm-hmm. Which is just it's a kind of claim you can dismiss on its face. It's an absurd claim that no morally or intellectually serious person would attempt to sustain. Particularly then to claim that, Christians have always believed this sort of thing. It's anachronistic. It assumes certain levels of knowledge about these things that have not been consistent through history. Mm-hmm. But also it's just not dealing fairly with the historical record. Yep. There have always been things that people have done and have built into the culture and rhythm of life that have limited people having children as fast as possible. Having children as fast as possible.
Even so much as looking at the Old Testament law in the way God allowed a time of rest for a woman.
Time of rest.
So she didn't get pregnant.
There were many times in the law when intercourse was not permissible. But then also you come in, and I'm not actually pro these
I know what you're going to say, though. I know what you're going to say.
For much of the history of the church in the medieval period, there were large swaths of life where it was considered sinful to be intimate with your spouse. So like the Lord's Day.
Because the church calendar
there'd be church calendar restrictions. Now, I think that's theologically really bad. But also, just practically, you have to understand that was a form of natural family planning that limited people's fertility. That was so you have that all the way on one side, and then you have on the other side equally foolish where people are, and I would actually say that this side is worse than that side, because that side
I agree.
is not murdering children. Those are brothers. I disagree with them. I think they're totally wrong. But on the other side, you have people aborting their children and infanticide and that sort of thing. We want to be Christians in how we approach all of life, and that means that when the law of God forbids something, I'm going not just begrudgingly submit to it. I'm going to be eager, like, oh no, we can't use hormonal birth control. I'm going to learn to love that law. And actually you do, because you learn that it's caring for your wife, it's caring for you, it's good for you. The Lord often gives you more children than you thought you could handle, because he loves you and he's going to do you good through that. But within what's lawful, not going beyond what's written, but within what is lawful, I think it is wise for mothers and fathers to exercise prudence and to love their children, love one another. And I think that often looks like coming up with a plan and being wise. And then being interruptible. The Lord in his providence will give you a baby when it wasn't exactly your time. You just go, thank you, Lord. I also think you need to guard against coldness in the marriage bed and wives becoming fearful and grouchy and viewing their husband's sexual interest in them as a problem to be managed instead of a joy to embrace. And that's a sin. Yeah. We're not to deprive one another. And so there's lots of wisdom and landmines here. Mm-hmm. If you have a specific question about your circumstance, you should talk to your pastor. Yeah. And ask for counsel, because there's so many different, areas where people have different circumstances.
I think we covered all the ones I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Now.
So another question that we got that I thought was a good one, and one lots of people have asked us particularly lately, to the point where we've even developed like a page on our website to talk about it, and we spend significant pastoral resources supporting people working through this question. Basically, the question is, what are some general principles that folks should be considering when they're deciding to relocate to a community like the one in Ogden, whether it's here in Ogden or another church somewhere, as a lay member or just as an ordinary Christian family? What are some things they should be thinking through? How can you walk through that process wisely? A little bit of background. We've had quite a few families move to join what we call the Ogden Borough. the church and the related community and businesses and all this sort of enterprise that we have going here, and that the Lord has planted here in his kindness. And that's led us to kind of feel our way towards, okay, how do we help people make this decision? We can't make decisions for people, but how do we help them make a wise decision for their family? And on our end, that looks like talking to folks on the phone, getting conversations who are thinking about it, helping them visit well so that when they come, they do the right things they need to do to investigate, have the conversations that need to happen, and even setting expectations is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a big one.
On all fronts, and then helping them, if they do decide to move, to do so well. So what are some of the things that you think that you've noticed helps a family succeed in moving to a community like ours? Maybe even just from a wife's perspective too.
I think one of the biggest things that I've noticed that helps people do it well and flourish really well and very quickly is if newcomers are themselves hospitable.
Yeah.
I think it can be hard for people to realize, like, they're coming into an already established hospitality calendar, and there's probably multiple new families coming into town at the same time. So if they're all expecting to be at the pastor's house every Sunday, that's probably not going to work. But if they are able themselves to host others regularly, they're going to get to know people a lot faster than waiting to be the ones invited, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think just generally, like I mentioned, expectations. There are lots of levels where expectations need to be realistic. In our community, that looks like, let's make sure that people don't think that they, with one or two conversations, can sort of parachute into a community. Kids are going to be in a school. Membership's going to be automatic, kind of all these things. We're getting to know people. Our school has a process for entry. It sometimes has in several cases required a family to delay putting their children in the school for an academic year while they're acclimating to the culture of the church, while we're getting to know them. We guard the culture of the school very closely in the culture of the church. So there's testing standards for a child to come into our school that are for their good and also for the good of the whole class. So they don't come in and they're like way off of the standards. It's a kindness
to everyone.
Because they're high standards. And we help and we give them those ahead of time and talk with the headmaster and all of that. That's an example of an expectation issue where if someone comes in expecting to be vetted and gotten to know and like go through our membership 8 weeks and go through interviews with elders before membership, and to sometimes be told like, yes, we do want you in membership. Here's 3 or 4 things we'd like to see happen first, though. Repentance here, wisdom here, yeah, that kind of thing. And it's different for every person. Expectations are important. On the question of how do you decide to move, that's a really big one.
Yeah.
It's also, in my view, on a meta level, pretty simple, but not easy. There are complications that make it not simple. And I'll explain that. But I work through a checklist. If I was thinking about my family's in a place, let's say we're in a random town. I'm not a pastor. I'm just a plumber doing whatever. And I'm thinking about relocating. I would think, okay, is there a church in a community here where I want my children to grow up to look like these people? I want them particularly to be able to imitate the elders and the leaders of this community, where we are reasonably able to fulfill all of our duties in terms of provision, Christian enculturation, Christian education, all these things. If there's not a community there, am I called to plant a church or participate in a new work that is feasible to happen there? And am I at a point in life where I'm able to say, it's okay if it's 10 years before that type of community exists here. I'm willing to wait, work, and do that. And then if not, what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm either going to say I'm satisfied at a place that's not exactly the church-wise where I'd like to be, but I still believe like I would want my kids to be like these kids. It's not overrun by feminism. It's not, post-war consensus weak, terrible, shallow, no church discipline. Like it's a decent church, but let's say it's like I'm post-millennial and this is more of a John MacArthur type of church, but it's a great church. Okay, cool. If you can be content and your family could be like those people in terms of Christian character and virtue, maybe you're going to be able to stay. But if not, then I'm moving. Like, just to be frank, I'm not going to be, I wouldn't have my family just sit and languish and be like, yeah, this is kind of lame, but we're exiles and sojourners. I'd be like, no, you're allowed to move. Like that's not a sin.
Yeah, I loved in Joel's talk at the conference. I had never thought about it this way, that there's actually a principle of fleeing in Scripture.
Yeah.
I loved that.
So if you're in a place where it's like, don't have Christian community, there's no prospect for it. I don't want my children or my wife to be. I don't want my wife to be like the women in the church. I don't want to be like the men in the church. I don't want my children to be like the children and the adults in the church. Generally, like maybe there's one or two bright spots here and there, but I'm like, generally speaking, I don't want them to become like these people. I'm thinking of moving at that point, and then what complicates it is when you have other competing things like a business that's difficult to relocate, family there that maybe aren't like-minded in terms of Christian faith, but they are family, and those are not light decisions. That's when it's like, now get some counsel, talk it through with, we talk this through with people all the time who are considering relocating. Then I would say visit, do some on the ground work, do your homework, make sure you're getting those expectations aligned. You're coming into a community of sinners. It's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You're joining a work.
People that stand out in my mind too have been the ones, I know this is not ideal for everybody because of work, but when they can like come for a month and really see what it's like.
Yeah, and some people have done that even.
Yeah, we've had several families do that, and It just seems like it's a more, I don't know, it just is a better situation all around, because I feel like they're getting their toes actually wet in the water. And
yeah. So, do what you can ahead of time. And then a lot of people are going to shame you. They're going to be like, yo, you're fleeing, you're such a coward, or wow, this is all just like celebrity megachurchianity. And yeah, don't go to Moscow because Doug Wilson is there. Don't go to Ogden because of Dan or Eric or me, or go if you believe that the church, the body of Christ that's growing there, are the people you want to become like and you want to be with. Mm-hmm. That's the real thing. And the leaders need to be good and qualified too, and all that follows. But that's what I'm thinking through and would be thinking through and have seen people do well. Mm-hmm. And even in cases where people have come and had work to do, to come in a membership or different things, we've seen so many people do so well in just saying, yep, I'm going to submit to these elders. I'm going to assume that they're giving wise counsel here, and they're not trying to be rude to me. They're loving me. Mm-hmm. And we are in those cases, like genuinely. Okay, next question. Mm-hmm. What is the name of Lexy's Substack?
Wow, it took me a literal second.
I know.
In the Marginalia.
In the Marginalia. I think it's like, in the Marginalia.substack.com. And Lexy writes there. It's not like every day or every week, but it's like every week.
It was on a roll, and then we all started getting sick. Yeah. So
she posts over there.
But guess what, guys? All my books are unpacked now, so I can actually get onto some of the lists I was waiting for.
Yeah.
So
no, and it's great little.
I have some new architecture books I want to post about.
Oh yeah.
What else do I have?
Love it.
I have a stack of canning books that I want to post about. See, guys, there's all the things I want to do. And then there's the laundry.
Do it.
It keeps needing to be folded.
There's laundry for a growing number of people. Hey there. What was I'm not just saying hey there to you right now. This was part of the question.
I got it.
What was the dyslexia program that you used?
At home, we started out with Logic of English, which was a curriculum. It was very helpful. And Ira ended up finishing that, the second part of the program in the school. And then after that, he completed cognitive therapy, which was brain training through Learning RX. So Learning RX is like the overall business, and the specific program was the brain training therapy.
Gotcha.
There you go.
Excellent.
The PACE program. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It is not just PACE, PACE. The PACE program is brain training.
Gotcha. No, that's helpful. What advice would you give for a single woman in her mid-20s who greatly desires to be married, but there are no eligible men at her church?
Is it true that they are not eligible, or are you being fussy?
That is a good first step. Evaluate. He's 5'10", not 6 foot.
He is
Out.
introverted, not extroverted. He has no facial hair, and I want facial hair. He prefers motorcycles, and I'm deathly scared of motorcycles. He likes to wear red shirts, and I hate red shirts. These are some literal things I've heard from people, you guys.
That is true. Okay, what next? No eligible men.
No eligible men.
So let's say she's not being fussy. She's like, no, I feel like I'm not being fussy.
Yeah.
There's one guy, and he's open, like, recently talked about being addicted to pornography, and like, I'm not going to marry that guy. Okay, but what do I do?
I mean, if it were me, I would move. That's my personality, though. I'm pretty extreme about things. I would probably move to a place where there were more eligible bachelors.
Where there were more mans.
Yeah. Go to Alaska. Go find a good church in Alaska.
Seriously, it's all men, many of them unmarried. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this before in terms of going to conferences, putting yourself out there, talking to other churches in the area, or reaching out to churches where you think there could be eligible men, doing things like the singles mixer that we had at the New Christendom press conference.
I just think staying in one place is not going to be the answer.
No, and it can also be like, I've seen several people meet and get married through social media in Christian circles. So if you begin to join, and like Twitter's the one I know the best, Elon's X. If you just start participating in some subculture of Christian Twitter or wherever else, and your profile picture is a picture of you, and you are doing your best to put your best foot forward in terms of literally, I mean, that, and people are aware that you're single and you're looking for a husband. Like, be intentional. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and be wise. Involve father and other authority figures as available and appropriate, but don't be scared to put yourself out there and cast a broader net than just who happens to be in my congregation on Sunday morning in this small town or city or suburb or wherever you are, because there are other ponds to fish in. So you got to find the other ponds, and you got to get a line in the water. Nice. Does Lexi have a list or some go-to sources for modest women clothes? That's what it says, women clothes.
Okay.
I didn't say it that way.
Okay.
Clothes for women, I'm assuming.
I just don't shop at the mall.
Don't shop at the mall. Okay. X the mall off your list.
Yeah, take that off the list.
Don't go to the mall. We go to the mall to walk. We don't go to the mall to shop.
I just think, like, I don't know what the word is. Like, more classic styles are generally more modest, and they're generally more expensive. In my mind, is just that it's because sometimes, not always anymore, unfortunately, it used to be that if people had money, they had good taste. So people that could afford more expensive clothing had better taste. It was going to be modest for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that used to be pretty universally true.
It is no longer universally true that people even know what good taste is or agree upon it. But for me, that is older styles like J. Crew, Banana Republic, Bowden, that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I literally don't like giving a list like that, because I do think it's true that a Christian woman should be able to walk almost anywhere and create beauty around her with what her resources are, be it the thrift store, be it American Eagle, be it JCPenney, be it Kohl's, like whatever it is. And I'm sure some of you are mad that I'm not talking about all linen clothing right now, because I'm just not. That's not the reality for most people. But so that's kind of what I maybe it's just the way I grew up, because that's kind of my mom's style. She's more old Hollywood, I would describe my mom as.
Yeah.
I am not more that. I am more librarian than my mother. But that's the taste that was in my home, was classy. And so I've always just gravitated towards that. But you kind of do, like, I really don't want Christian women to be cookie cutter versions of one another. That's not what I'm going at. When people hear modesty, sometimes that's what they think is like, okay, everyone's wearing dresses down to their ankles, and their wrists. And that's not, sure, there's very beautiful dresses out there like that, but that's not what I mean. I think it is really good to cultivate beautiful taste in clothing, but also just be aware that older, classier styles kind of stand the test of time for a reason.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Here at Bright Hearth, we're all about helping you not turn into a girl if you're a boy, or into a boy if you're a girl. You know what might be doing that to you? The soap in your shower. And so we are pleased to introduce you to IndigoSundrySoap.com, link in the description, of course, who can provide you with soaps and more without any of the nasty stuff. And because they love you, they're giving you a discount code, guys. So use code, all caps, Bright Hearth, for 10% off your whole order. Support this great Christian company and support Bright Hearth Podcast at the same time. Check them out at IndigoSundrySoap.com. And of course, that link is in the description. Here at Bright Hearth, we love to support Christian family businesses that are doing great work, which is why we're so happy to commend to you A Well-Worn Story. A Well-Worn Story is a sewing studio based in New Glarus, Wisconsin, and they're making handcrafted leather and canvas goods. It's run by a husband and wife team, and they focus on making beautiful products from natural, high-quality materials that only get better with age, telling your unique story. Made in rural America, this Christian family business makes high-quality handcrafted leather and canvas bags, belts, and wallets, and these are heirloom quality, stuff that you can hand down to your next generation. You can order online at www.awellwornstory.com and use the discount code BRIGHTHEARTH, all caps, no spaces, to save 10% on any order. Okay, I have another one for you. Super easy.
You seemed really interested in the closet question.
I didn't listen at all.
I know you didn't.
I was getting the next question ready. I was like, perfect. I can tune out. This has nothing to do with me. I have literally nothing to offer. I'm not going to pretend like I have something to offer.
I did want to say, people ask the question of the cost of clothing all the time. I love Poshmark. I buy most of my stuff.
Where I got my boots, which are my whole personality now.
Oh, man. I wish I could have recorded the night I showed you and Ben Poshmark.
We were like, what? Now I'm like new boot goofing every day. Anyway, not really. I've only bought one pair of boots. Next question, super easy, not controversial at all.
Oh, good.
Let's see here. It's just what hard evidence convinced you that all vaccines are ineffective? I figured like the zeitgeist has moved enough that we probably won't be instantly deleted from all of the
I'm really surprised you asked
things. Because legitimately, guys, like I've watched this play out for a long time. You couldn't talk about this on a lot of these platforms. Like we would talk about them, but just not on these platforms. Social media and things like that. We talk about them through other channels in personal conversations, mainly like the people around us, our church, because you would just get instantly, like the AI is always listening. But so the way that it's phrased is a little bit prejudicial. I don't know if they meant that or not, but they phrased it, evidence convince you that all vaccines are ineffective. A lot of our reasons for vaccine hesitancy and vaccine rejection aren't hard evidence in every single case that, like, I haven't demonstrated positively through empirical means that every single vaccine that could possibly be taken is totally ineffective. And by that, I mean 0% effective all the way down. I don't think you have to do that. I think instead you can draw conclusions that end up applying to basically all of modern vaccination from other means, like by understanding how these things are approved and what testing they're going through, and by the way, what testing they are not going through.
I think that's my big question for a question like this is like, what hard evidence have they shown us that it actually works?
Yeah, and especially
and doesn't have dangerous side effects.
Especially if you begin to look at like, let's look at congressional hearings or court cases where people are asked under oath, hey, vaccine developer A,
do you know
has your vaccine ever been through a double-blind trial study that would meet the standards any Christian should agree upon for who's scientifically literate for what would be a good protocol to establish whether something's an effective medical intervention or not? And the answers in every case, like I might be overstating it here, but I think that it is the case that no vaccine has been through that kind of testing, period.
You're not overstating it. As a matter of fact, we haven't even lived long enough as a generation to understand that the debauched vaccine rollout that we just saw is basically what's been repeated over and over and over again throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't lived through all of history, so we don't know that. We think, oh, it's only the COVID vaccine that's like this. And it's
No, it's not.
No, this is how they have underhandedly rolled every vaccine out.
Yeah, so you need to know fundamentally that vaccines are not going through double-blind trials that would be the type of trials that would give us a good actual scientific and medical knowledge of the effectiveness of a treatment against a placebo group over a sufficient period of time with a sufficient number of people.
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, you need to know that the U.S. government, big pharma and big government, has actively made it so that companies cannot be held responsible. Things like the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act in '86 eliminated liability for childhood vaccine manufacturers, meaning that you couldn't take them, in most cases, you can't take them to court, and you can't say, hey, there is a high degree of probability that your medical intervention caused this adverse effect, up to and including death, by the way, in my child, and so we would like to sue you and hold you civilly liable, which is a reasonable standard.
Totally reasonable, especially if they have information they're hiding.
Yeah. VAERS is Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System. It's a public data collection to essentially just track correlative data with vaccine safety. So you'll find high degrees of correlation, totally unacceptable degrees of correlation between vaccine injuries, proximity of vaccination, and certain injuries or adverse outcomes. The thing is, guys, like, you can't prove, let's say that 5 people get a vaccine and one of them has an adverse side effect within a day of getting it. Mm-hmm. That doesn't by itself medically establish that the vaccine caused it. However, that's why we should have double-blind studies with large control groups and things like that vaccine manufacturers are not.
Del Bigtree and RFK Jr. sat down with Fauci a couple years ago and told them basically, like, we will stop all of our quote-unquote anti-vax propaganda if you guys will just produce one study showing that these are not harmful and are effective. And Fauci literally said, we will never do that.
We will never do that.
So my favorite resources over the years, you really liked the Truth About Vaccine documentary series that is produced by Christians. It is a multi-part series. I stay up to date weekly still through listening to the High Wire.
Yeah. With what is his name?
Del Bigtree.
Del Bigtree.
I've listened to that for years, and I really, really like that one. What's the book? Oh, I can see the cover.
Are you talking about the Turtles one?
The Turtles one is supposed to be really good. Turtles all the way down. We haven't read
that one, but people talk about that one.
Suzanne, I haven't read the book, actually. Oh, my goodness. Dr. Suzanne Humphreys is a Christian. She wrote it. All of you guys are shouting it who are listening right now. It's black and purple on the front. Anyways, I listened to her lectures probably in 2019.
Dissolving Illusions.
That one, I like that one. I have referenced the charts before in other social media platforms, but I can't find her lectures anymore on YouTube. They're no longer there. I used to listen to her lectures, though.
YouTube took them down?
Imagine that.
Unbelievable. I would have thought they would have want access to all sorts of perspectives.
It was her stuff that kind of sold me.
Yeah.
So
along with the big pharma too, like whenever you look at the alignment of incentives, this is true of any industry, but it's particularly true. Christians particularly should value this in any industry. But medical and scientific industries, where we're talking about interpretation of data and statistical analysis that is going to affect life and death for people, we should want financial incentives to be aligned. And right now, they're perfectly misaligned, where doctors are, from a professional, let's say, public pressure and professional guild pressure, they're the consequences for even questioning these industries are instant loss of medical licensing for many people.
Well, and you have to realize your doctor makes more money if they vaccinate your child.
Yeah, and
it's just the reality.
The consequence on the other side is if you're just wildly pro-vax and you give people as many as possible, you get more money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very poorly aligned incentive structure to promote truth and
Also,
the pursuit of truth.
it's just lost information that measles won't kill you. I don't know if no one's told you that before. They're not going to kill you, though. Chickenpox don't kill you.
Yeah.
These things don't, a lot of these things do not kill you.
Yeah. One of the things that, again, is not adequately studied via control groups is like, okay, let's say, what is the mortality or adverse effect of a population who all contract a short-term illness, like some of these viral infections contract a short-term illness, versus a group that was vaccinated against those? And let's look at and compare adverse reactions between the two in a true double-blind study that would. And again, they won't do these. The government has guaranteed that they won't do these because they have no civil liability.
Yeah.
So they only have, think about how expensive it is to do a multi-year, truly double-blind study of this nature. Extraordinarily expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's
Very
any
slow.
issue, the result is that the FDA, if they're doing their job, which they don't, is going to prevent that medication that you've just, in many cases, invested billions or hundreds of millions of dollars developing, and now you have to trash can it because it had adverse reactions and it didn't work. You can look at this with other types of medicine. Like this is something we know about the medical industry. You could look at what they did with birth control. When birth control for women, there was a type of birth control that was coming out of its generic cycle. Basically, where a drug company developed this drug, it had a certain number of years of protection under copyright before another drug company could formulate it, the same drug. Okay, so this drug's coming out of copyright. So the company that developed that drug and made billions of dollars, they make a new drug that is a slightly different formulation, blah, blah, blah. It's patented differently. It's called Yaz in the example I'm giving. And it's just a different mixture of hormonal birth control. So we have this new one now. If you want the newest and best birth control, now you have to buy our expensive one again. You can't buy generic. Nobody can generically make it yet because now it's protected by law. Well, it turns out that financial alignment, incentive alignment, was perfectly misaligned because the new thing, in addition to being evil because it was hormonal birth control, also started to kill women of heart attacks. And that turned out that there was an adverse coronary symptom, or side effect of this pill. And literally women dropped dead. And so you see how the perfect storm of government intervention, essentially sheltering of drug companies from civil liability, killed people. So the COVID vaccine should be a huge wake-up call for people. I mean, it's one of those things like, again, you guys, you Google this, I'm sure you're going to find 50,000 articles that are like only complete idiots and loons who are conspiracy theorists who listen to Joe Rogan believe anything negative about vaccines. They're all wonderful. Nothing bad ever happened with the COVID vaccine, blah, blah, blah. Guys, we saw with our own eyes, I know they tried to memory hole it, elite athletes across the world dropping dead of heart attacks. You remember the comedian on stage, that woman who said,
Yes.
she was like basically cursing God.
All of the people that were like getting hit by trains because they were passing out on the side of train stations, all of the stillbirth rates flying
miscarriage,
through
stillbirth,
the roof.
shedding. So anyway, wow, I knew that we were gonna. I was like, it's time to talk about this. So to summarize, you don't need hard evidence in the case of every single vaccine that it is 0% effective. That's not the standard for whether I'm going to take a medical intervention or not. If I have broad data, if I know for a fact that this drug has not been adequately tested to a sufficient standard for a reasonable Christian for medical and scientific effectiveness, and I know they're not doing those tests. They admit it under oath. They not only are they not, they will not. That enough right there is enough for me to say I'm not going to inject my child with it.
We didn't even talk about the abortion part of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because I think the Dr. Stanley Plotkin deposition, you can go look it up. He is the doctor that under oath was talking about like how he personally, harvested 70 babies, essentially.
Yeah, they say, it was just this one fetal cell line from this.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. They're lying.
It was that one time, but it took like 20 babies to get to that recipe specifically, if I could put it so crassly as that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he, under oath, that's been a really big thing for years and years, like just saying, like, I am one doctor who's done this. There are hundreds of other. These are the number of, murdered babies I have been involved with in investigating, whatnot. Recently, though, he actually came out with an article. I was reading it yesterday, I think. He actually came out with an article where he is finally admitting the skeptics are correct. They're onto something. We have no data. Like, this has just come out this past week.
Whoops.
So that's huge for a guy who, he literally said under oath, like, I do not fear the Lord. I am not worried about facing him on the day I die because of what I've done with these babies. Like, he's that wicked and evil. But he is now swaying to the other side where he's at least saying, no, they are right. We don't have evidence to prove what we're trying to do. Mm. So that's a pretty big, people that have been following the Plotkin deposition for a while, it's a pretty big deal. So, but I did want to say one of my favorite books is How to Raise a Healthy Child Despite Your Doctor by Dr. Mendelsohn. I like it because he's anti-vax. He is a pediatrician. He's older, and he gives all sorts of at-home remedies. You're not having to go buy any fancy oils or herbs or anything like that. It's stuff that's probably in your medicine cabinet. That is the one book I take places with me when I'm traveling. We lived with Brian's parents, that's the only medical reference book I took with us. I love that book.
And the philosophy, this philosophy I'm about to say pervades that book and that whole methodology of treating medical issues in your family. Yeah,
because you've read that one too when we've been sick.
It's because the question again, I keep coming back to this: what evidence do I have that all vaccines are ineffective? When I'm thinking about any medical intervention for the family, like take something pedestrian like Tylenol, giving Tylenol to children to reduce a fever. Well, I actually shouldn't be asking, what evidence do I have that Tylenol is ineffective in doing that? Because it turns out Tylenol is effective in reducing fevers and limiting pain. But I should actually start with a more important question, which is, do I need a medical intervention for this thing? Mm-hmm. Well, and it turns out for fevers, you generally don't.
Or is it just like a physiological immune response?
There are times, turns out fevers are actually good for you. You are made by God. He knew what he was doing. And fevers have a purpose when it comes to the immune response to a viral infection or something like that. So secondly, what are the known, studied, possible side effects of this intervention? And how do they stack up against the thing I'm trying to treat? So discrete childhood illnesses versus vaccine adverse reactions. And I say, and Tylenol is another great example where I'd go, most of the time I'm not going to give my kid Tylenol because it's actually really bad for them. It actually has a lot of adverse negative consequences. Mm-hmm. And these are insufficiently talked about. They're thrown to these really fastly read ad copies at the end of advertisements, tiny print on a bottle that basically starts saying, oh, yeah, Tylenol can do this, it can do that, it can do that. This is something pedestrian like Tylenol, where there's not a huge industry. There's still an industry devoted to hiding anything bad that happens from Tylenol. But how much more with something extraordinarily controversial like the vaccine industry that has potentially caused adverse harm and death upon millions and millions of people because everybody's getting it. Almost everybody's getting it. So I want Christians to think more fundamentally about some of these questions you should be asking before you're even asking, is it effective in doing the thing it says it's going to do? Yeah. Like statins. Statins can do this thing. We've measured it. Do I need that thing to happen? Has there been a study showing that having that thing happen will actually help me? Because it turns out maybe there's not.
Just covering a bunch of stuff up again.
There's a million corners and highways and byways of the medical industry that you start asking these questions, and you discover that the answer is, we don't even need the thing that this thing does to happen. That effect, though it does work to produce that effect, isn't an effect that has any meaningful but positive effect on your health.
They're just Band-Aids. They're not cures.
Yeah. And even in some cases, the thing that they're Band-Aiding, the symptom they're suppressing, like a fever, is not even a bad thing.
Yeah.
It's and I get, like, a kid's really fussy and you're trying to help them sleep and maybe you give them something to help them sleep. Like there's situations like we're not like anti-ever. I don't punch any doctor I see in the face as soon as I see him. There are doctors in our church. There are doctors I trust.
Yeah. We need
Of
more
course,
Christian
we need
doctors.
more doctors.
But we need more Christian doctors acting like Christians, not Christian doctors saying, go vaccinate your kids.
I'm just going to be.
I'm just going to say it.
I'm going to be a vending machine for pharmaceutical companies that are absolutely legally shielded from any repercussions for killing people. So that's really evil, and that's the state of our
if you start
medical industry.
making the pediatricians themselves liable for all of your child's now chronic issues and they have to pay all your medical bills for you, well, that's a different situation.
Yeah. And there has been, even with how limited it is, you have programs like the Federal Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. It's, even with how limited this is, it's paid out $5 billion to people injured or killed by vaccines.
And that was very few people that are actually getting any money,
tiny
because
percentage.
It's so horrible.
The standard for proving, again,
gaslighting you nonstop.
They can stand up and say, well, correlation doesn't equal causation. So just because you had a huge seizure and you died seconds after getting my vaccine doesn't mean my vaccine had anything to do with it. Technically true. But what I want to say is, now, doctor, why don't you apply that same standard to how you study the efficacy of your vaccine in the first place?
Yes.
Oh, well, I have many reasons for why I don't, and you wouldn't understand it because you're one of those Christian fundamentalists. Like, well, actually, I just have a brain. We're out of time.
Okay.
So we'll try to do at least a question or two sprinkled in through the episodes to keep them rolling. Send us a text. Yeah. If you want us to do a follow-up episode on this, I'm sure we could, but now that we're probably canceled from all platforms once this releases anyway, might as well. Yeah, keep sending in your questions, topic requests, things like that through that. Send us a message feature on your podcast catcher. Support our sponsors. They're great and do good Christian work. Christians doing good work in their fields. If there's something helpful to you in our sponsors, make sure you check them out. And lastly, if you like what we do here on Bright Hearth and you want to support our work, Bright Hearth and New Christendom Press, and help pay our employees and keep this whole thing going, then sign up for Patreon. Great way to chip in $5 a month to help keep this show happening, and you can do that at patreon.com/brighthearth. We often release in the kitchen a little short patron-only podcast there as our thank you, and have more down in the weeds practical resources a lot of the time related to those. So thanks for listening, guys, and make haste slowly. We'll see you next time on Bright Hearth.